equipment and crew. Sailing the course, there's no real change, it's just moved the rules around. A mark now includes any object intentionally attached to it, so that would be any keep-off buoy or dinghy that's intentionally attached to it, but does not include unintentional attachments such as boats that have got themselves tangled up with the mark. The boat would not be part of the mark. An obstruction we can now define as a line which helps us at the end of the river, an area or a line. We did it anyway, but the rule's clearer. Class flags, we use these quite a lot because we're running more than one kind of event at a time. We have dinghies and keel boats sometimes. We can designate an event flag. Flag Victor, if it's used, you don't have to use it. It means that any support people should monitor the safety channel. We might have a discussion between the Lymington clubs whether we're actually intending on using that. That would be a race management policy decision. It's not my decision at all. The orange flag is now at the end of the starting line, and the blue flag is at the end of the finishing line. So you don't have a blue and a yellow flag, or sorry, a blue and an orange flag on a boat unless it is both a starting line and a finishing line. The rules have moved around with regards to exoneration. 3 different rules have gone into one place in Rule 43, and we're actually going to cover one of the consequences of that later on, so I'm going to move on through that. There is a change to what happens if a boat capsizes and the crew get detached. You don't break the rule if the boat drifts downwind anymore when the crew are not on board. But the crew are not allowed to keep sailing to the next mark if they've left somebody in the water. They've got to stop and go back for them. But at the finish, because the definition of finish has changed as well, if a capsized boat goes through the finishing line, as soon as the first part of the hull goes through the line, the boat's finished. Trapeze harnesses have reverted to 2 kilos max for most classes, unless they specify something different. You can now come and say, I've broken a rule that was subject to discretionary penalty. Please, will you think of a suitable penalty for me? And the guidance says it will be less if you own up than if you're convicted in a hearing. We've got new forms. The new forms are actually ready, and I can actually send them to the club now. They were approved this week by World Sailing. So I'll remember to copy Robin probably at the same time as I copy the Royal and the Royal Solent as well. I'll put that on my to-do list. Looking at on the water situations, there's no fundamental change to the rules of Part 2. A couple of rules have changed as a result of reorganising exoneration, which means that Rule 21 has changed. And so 21, 22, 23 have moved up 1 rule. We might have left a blank. It might have been less confusing, but we didn't. The structure is exactly the same, and we use the structure, and we'll come back to that this evening. Basically, if you're in this situation, the blue boat, this is almost a direct replica of the America's Cup, the Prada Cup start, where Ineos got the penalty. You're not entitled to mark room and you have to keep clear. However, if there is room, the leeward boat cannot luff you into the committee boat. They can shut the door as long as they do it early enough that you have to pass the wrong side of the committee boat. That's fine, but they can't make you hit it. Is this about the right pace, Gareth, for this?
Yeah, all good. All
so
good.
3 situations on the start line. Blue can luff yellow, but not so hard as to force yellow to tack, because yellow will hit the committee boat and break Rule 31. Green can luff and force red to tack, especially if she's a dinghy, because she's got room to tack and tack back. Green must not go through head to wind first, otherwise she will break Rule 13, tacking. Similarly for grey, if she goes past head to wind first, she'll break the rule, and she probably cannot force the middle boat, the turquoise boat, to tack, because that boat will break rule 13 against pink, and you're not giving room to somebody if you force them to break a rule. So that covered those three. Green coming in at the start can come into a gap, has to keep clear of red, will go above close hauled, has to give room for blue to luff to keep clear, which has a knock-on effect to the dominoes above her. So again, green cannot force blue to tack, to force yellow to tack to hit the mark, and has to keep clear of red. When the start signal goes, red does not have to bear away to close haul course, and therefore green does not have to bear away to close haul course, even though she's not allowed to sail above a proper course with respect to blue, because her proper course is to keep clear of red. So when the start gun goes, there's no instant requirement for boats to be sailing close hauled, but of course it's in their best interest to get going in most circumstances. Does a boat break a rule if you contact the anchor line? No, the anchor line is not part of the mark. However, if somebody luffs you into the anchor line, that would not be giving you room, because it's not seamanlike to cause a boat to get tangled with an anchor, because that's just not seamanlike. How was that?
That was pretty good, John.
And I'm sure everybody knew that. You could have all just done that for yourselves, couldn't you now, because you all listened last week.
And we've got the video up, and it's had plenty of people viewing it on YouTube, so all good. Right, so let's start cracking into this evening's presentation. We just did a bit of a delay for those who have been joining us late due to Boris's waffling on about what's going to happen over the next few months. That was a 10-minute recap or something, and now, yeah, I'd love to introduce John Doerr to give us his bit from the start line, going as far as we can within an hour, covering the rules.
Well, there's a few questions that were asked last week, and I think it's important that we address questions that people have, because it's more interesting than just listening to me waffle on. I've got I have got, if necessary, I've got the whole rule book to waffle onto. So
and anyone who has a question while John's talking, please just ask it on the chat sort of messenger feature, and I will I'll make sure John gets the question as soon as possible. Excellent, John. Over to you, mate. Carry on.
And we're going to record this now, I think.
It is on
recording will be
now.
Available, and yep. I'll send a PDF of the slides that we actually use, and they'll be available, so you can go through them in your own time, and that will accompany any movies that we used during the presentation. I hope people found that useful or interesting from the last time. So today we're going to look at some questions last week which were on U flags and black flags. I've been asked to look at hunting the right-of-way boat luffing in port starboard situations, and actually how much can you luff, and can you take somebody off the course. Then we're going to look at port tack boats crossing a starboard tack boat upwind. Then we finally get to some marks, and we'll look at the key difference between a windward mark and a leeward mark. And then I've got a little bit on the Prada Cup incidents, and I would expect that will pretty well fill the time that we've got available.
I think it's about right.
Yeah. But don't hesitate. Again, I think it's still much more interesting to come in when people have got questions. So please don't hesitate to come in and ask questions, as we've discussed. And then if there's any other questions, I think that you've kindly said that if we need another session, we can have one. If you've got any other questions we can't answer, we'll store them up and we'll put another one together. We'll just see how we go. We are going to come back to the structure and the important thing of this structure. And I'll just keep repeating this because it just is so important. There are only so many rules that require a boat to keep clear. There's always one that governs any situation, and it always applies. One boat always has to keep clear. The other boat may have to give you room to keep clear, but it will be a different rule, and it does not stop your obligation to keep clear. You may be limited to sail a proper course under some circumstances. You should always avoid contact. If a boat capsizes, you have to try and miss it. You shouldn't interfere with boats that are racing when you're not. And you shouldn't interfere unless you're sailing on your proper course with boats on different legs. That's about the sum of, that's it. Can I go home now? Because that's the rules. That's all there is. Okay, let's have a look. From last week, there was a question. If a boat was compelled by the breach of another boat to break either rule 30.3, the U flag rule, or the black flag rule, is she exonerated for that breach? And here there's good news and bad news. The good news is, yes, you can be exonerated for breaking that rule if you were compelled by a boat breaking a rule. So if a boat luffed very quickly before the start and you couldn't respond and there's contact, but you still went over the line, you could be exonerated from breaking the U flag rule or the black flag rule. However, that's the good news. This is the bad news. You must still start correctly. So you will still have to return and start correctly, or you will break rule 28.1 that requires you to start, and you're not compelled not to start. You can start any time after the starting signal. So the fact that you were forced over does not compel you to break rule 28.1. And the problem is you might not even realize that you are OCS because there'll be no X-ray flag or no individual recall to help you because it's a U flag or a black flag start. So good news and bad news, I'm afraid. Stony silence, that has met.
John, it's Carl. I asked the question, and I think that's a fabulous response. What is interesting there, I guess, is if you get chucked at the top mark with the blackboard of death,
yes,
you actually untangle that. Anyway, that's for maybe another time.
Well, that would depend on what the instructions say about the blackboard of death. If it says, if your number is on that board, you shall leave the course, then you have no option but to leave the course. Otherwise, you will break that rule.
Then just go for the redress later.
And if you do that deliberately, you're in the poo.
Yep.
So you have to leave the course. And the same way as if it was a black flag and you're on the black flag board, even if you want to argue it in a protest hearing, you can't restart.
Okay, but so you just go to redress and see what happens.
You've got to go through the redress thing.
Yeah.
And if the protest committee find that you were compelled to break the rule and you did in fact start correctly, then you will get redress.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Okay.
So this is called when hunting breaks a rule. So we're moving on to rule 16. And those of you who we might come back. So is that a big enough diagram to see?
Yeah, looking good.
So what has happened is blue is on starboard, yellow's on port. Yellow was crossing clear ahead. Maybe blue's got a wind shift. She's luffed, and that forces yellow to luff in response to keep clear. That's what's happened. The question, does blue break a rule by luffing and forcing yellow to luff immediately? And it's got a question mark. So if anybody wants to offer an opinion,
feel free to unmute yourselves and
feel free to unmute yourselves and join in the discussion. There aren't many brave people on this call, Gareth.
I think you're right.
I'll go for it. It's clearly a port starboard. He's not. If he's sailing to windward,
yeah.
It depends what you call luff immediately. Is he luffing head to wind, or is he just going up with a wind shift? If he's just going up,
blue luffs on the wind shift, and yellow responds immediately to keep clear. Is what it's supposed to show.
Oh, okay. So yellow's kept clear of blue, so no rule's been broken.
Yeah. Okay. So no. So blue, when blue luffs, she must give room to yellow to keep clear. But as yellow is able to do so and does, there's no rule broken.
That's what I'd have expected.
Yeah.
Now we're still going upwind. This time yellow is sailing to pass astern of blue, and blue bears away to make life difficult.
I'll go again.
And does blue break a rule by bearing away and forcing yellow to bear away immediately?
Yes.
Very good. And the answer is yes, because they are beating to windward and yellow is keeping clear by passing to leeward of blue, as opposed to the previous situation. Actually, it's probably arguable that she's trying to pass to leeward there as well, actually. But there we go. Is keeping clear by passing to leeward. Rule 16.2 applies, and blue will break the rule. This is a safety rule. If you're particularly in keel boats and you bear away like this and it's breezy and you force the other boat to bear away behind you, you're likely to get rig tangles, and that is a pretty dangerous situation. So this is known as the anti-hunting rule. Some of us think it's unnecessary, but the fact is it's in the rule book at the moment. So if you're going upwind and you bear away, you must do it early enough that the port tack boat does not have to respond immediately. Begs the question, how long after? Well, it's just not immediate is the question. So I have to tell you, I've never, ever been in a protest room and made a decision under this rule. I have made decisions on the water for match racing and team racing under this rule, but never in fleet racing. So because yellow must immediately change course, blue breaks rule 16.2. So let's just have a look what happens downwind. So they're going downwind, and if you trace this, yellow is actually passing clear ahead of blue, but blue bears away. And now yellow has to bear away also to keep clear. So the question's the same. Does blue break a rule by bearing away and forcing yellow to bear away immediately? Is Cole keeping brave?
I'm back in. I'm ready.
You're 2 out of 2 so far. You're doing well.
That was Henry, not Carl.
Oh, sorry, Henry. Sorry.
Both incredibly good looking.
So does blue? That's not in the rule book, unfortunately.
It's implied though, John.
Well, I could get very sexist about this, but I probably better not.
Blue, well, I'll go with this. Blue doesn't break rule 16.2 as long as blue bears away, giving yellow room to keep clear.
Brilliant. And because they're not beating to windward, rule 16.2, and that's a change this year, is now limited to when the boats are beating to windward. So when you're coming downwind, if the other boat has to respond immediately, but as long as she's able to do it and keep clear in a seaman-like way, blue doesn't break a rule.
Okay.
Postman hasn't been with my new rule book yet.
Oh, well, there you go. You can click on a link, you know. Well, did I put
I know,
the link
but
in?
it's not the same, is it?
What, as having a bit of that?
Yeah.
No, I agree. Mine's already got scribbles all over it. I don't think it's going to last 4 years. So blue must still give room for yellow, which she does, and room is the space she needs to act in a seaman-like way. So blue, if she forces yellow to jibe, that's got to be a seaman-like jibe. She can't afford her to, you know, certainly if she forced yellow to capsize, that would not be giving her room. But we expect yellow to be handled at a level consistent with the event that she's entered. Does that make sense? So if you enter a top event, you're expected to be able to jibe pretty promptly in most conditions. If it's a junior event or a club event, you don't have to be quite so smart.
YouTube.
If you're a folk boat, you can take forever. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. The other one, it's the fourth situation here. So blue is coming along, yellow is passing astern, but blue luffs again to make life pretty difficult. Does blue break a rule in this situation? Well, again, I'll get you off the hook this time. They're still sailing downwind, so no, blue does not break the rule by forcing yellow to luff. But of course, blue's got to be pretty careful, especially if she's a keel boat with a backstay on, about the kite catching the backstay on the way across, and then she won't have given room. So blue, when blue luffs, she must give room. And in, I mean, this shows, this is actually, I think, Jenica's. You know, you do have to be careful if these are things like 49ers or 29ers and you force what a skiff to luff, you've got to be pretty careful how you do that, because you could easily initiate a capsize. There's stony silence. I guess that people are perfectly happy and think this is all brilliant.
John,
No, actually, I have a question about this. Do you want to go first, Carl?
yeah, I will. John, figure 7 at the top there. So that looks like applying to sort of foiling or asymmetric boats that you're talking about, like you mentioned on the situation below. How do you really prove that you've, you know, let's say you get a big gust in as blue and you naturally come down on that? I mean, how does yellow prove that they've done that? I mean, it's quite an onus on them, isn't there, in the protest room to say, well, he came at me and I didn't have room to.
I mean, you're going to hear me repeat a track record from the last event, from the last talk, and almost every rules talk that I give. If you look at this diagram, this is going to depend upon the conditions about how far blue can bear away and has she given room or not. And it's going to depend on the boats, it's going to depend on the waves, it's going to depend on the wind, it's going to depend on all sorts of things. So there is a grey area but however you write this, Carl, however you write it, there is always going to be a small change that is going to put you from one side of the line to the other. Yeah?
For sure.
Yeah. That is true. Wherever you put that line, there will always be a point that moving a little bit is going to put you one side of the line or the other, wherever the line is. So I think they have to come back to remember that the rules are meant to be a shield and not a sword. If this goes into the room, it's one of those, I would not bet on the outcome.
Yeah, okay, he said, she said. So I'm guessing maybe if you've got a jury there, it's a slightly different deal. If
you're, it will depend on what information is available to the jury. I mean,
as on the water, I'm talking about. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. On the water, it's a lot easier. And even then, you know, you need people, you need umpires who know the boats.
For sure. Yeah.
But you can see a gust hitting, and you go, oh, I mean, doing 49ers is quite exciting at the games.
Yeah.
Sometimes. But yeah, I think it's a lot. I honestly think the rules work a lot better when you've got umpires on the water. But on the other hand, they're there to keep people out of hitting boats and getting around the race course, and other things win boat races, not rules.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much.
Anything else? Before
yeah, you mentioned capsizing and not acting in seaman-like manner. So an actual incident, going downwind on a run, I could sail deep enough and the wind building, it wasn't just like a gust, it was one of those, as you went down the run, the wind's building. So I've jibed onto port tack, I'm sailing downwind, I'm going to make the mark. It's pretty hairy, I'm very deep, but I'm in control. another boat had reached off on starboard, jibed, and then reached back, and out of control came reaching into me, pushed me up to the point where I then got knocked over by the wind and the waves, and ended up having to retire because it was so windy I couldn't get my boat back up right without outside assistance. I would have just sailed around the mark and finished the race.
Yep.
But I couldn't finish the race because what they done forced me to capsize. So did they break that rule?
If they jibed so close to you,
no, they jibed a long way, but they were coming back to the mark, and then as the wind built to handle the wind, they shot up into the wind, causing me to have to luff quickly.
Right. So they were a right of way. So they were the leeward boat at the time.
They were the leeward boat, yeah.
And they luffed.
Well, they didn't kind of luff. They kind of careered crazily up to windward.
Well, that's luffing,
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
but not above. So we went up onto.
But she's altered course. But
sorry?
She's altered course as a right of way boat. She now has to give you room.
Yeah.
So if you were, from the moment she altered course, if you were unable to keep clear of her without capsizing, she did not give you room.
Okay.
Now, the next thing is, what happens about it? Well, I mean, she would be disqualified in front of a protest committee, given your story.
Yeah.
Do you get any redress? Not unless you're damaged.
Right.
You
Just
my
pride was badly damaged.
If you were damaged by the incident, such that it affected, such that the damage, not the capsize, affected your finishing position.
Yeah.
So if you capsize and you're upside down for 2 minutes and then you get back up and you finish 2 minutes late, tough. But if you broke a tiller extension, so you couldn't actually handle the boat and you had to retire, then you can get redress.
Right.
Because if we gave redress every time a boat capsized, we'd never finish, we'd never finish the race.
Yeah.
It is in the end, is a sport, and there's a bit of bad luck involved and a bit of also avoiding trouble. And you might argue, well, I couldn't avoid trouble in that case, and that happens sometimes, but other people will say, well, you didn't look far enough ahead in that case.
Well, in hindsight, after I'd got ashore, I moaned about it a bit and thought next time I'll be wary of that. I'll know it's coming.
Exactly. So you'll, as Reg White said, the infamous tornado sailor, the tornado, he said, if I get in front and stay in front, I don't need to know the rules. I'll still win a gold medal. I don't get tested before I can pick up the medal.
Yeah.
Literally, that was his.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I've said, this last situation here is pretty dependent upon the conditions and the type of the boat. I could easily see that this could be a breach of the rule by Blue, but in other conditions it wouldn't be. And I think most protest committees, if they know it's windy and blustery and wavy and a boat's come in and they start thinking that was pretty close, they're going to go in favour, they'll go against Blue for altering course. If it's pretty benign conditions, they're going to find in favour of Blue. Okay, move on.
Good work.
So questions that are related to luffing, and I'm sorry I don't have a lot of diagrams, but somebody said, do we have to sail the correct course? Is luffing somebody off the course to benefit your own race allowed? Okay, the answer is, if you luff someone off the course, you will be overlapped and almost certainly sailing above your proper course. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Depending on how the overlap was established, you may break Rule 17. So if you came from astern on the same tack to leeward within 2 hull lengths, you're not allowed above your proper course. So you would break Rule 17. But if the overlap was established any other way, you don't break a rule simply by sailing above proper course. Right? Now there's a case, which is actually case 78, and it's pretty important, and it needs to be given prominence because it's been one of the biggest debates in rules sailing ever since Ben took Robert Scheidt out at the Windward Mark at the Olympics in 2000. There's a lot of people don't like that kind of sailing, and other people think it's fair game. And it's probably the biggest split conceptually between how competitors want to sail the game that I'm aware of. And it may be, if we took a straw poll, even of people listening, do you think taking somebody out is fair game, or do you think it should be prohibited? Perhaps you could do a straw poll somehow, Gareth.
You can, if everyone had their video on, we could do a quick, you'd have to screen share though.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I think it's probably a bit difficult, but I'm sure there are people in both camps. And I actually am in both camps at times. I think it depends on the competition for me. I can tell you, I won a world championship. I might have won it anyway, I'll never know. But the boat that was second in the last race, I started and I covered them the whole of the race course, and we went round the first mark, last and next to last. Every other race, we'd been both in the top 6. I have to say, the year before, the same boat had taken the national championship off me by doing it to me in reverse. So it was a bit of revenge built in there as well. However, since all that has happened, there is now a case which would have made even what I did quite interesting. And it's in italics. And normally I'd put things up there, but it's case 78. And it says, in a fleet race, either for one design or boats racing under handicap or rating system, a boat may use tactics that clearly interfere and hinder another boat's progress, provided that if she is protested under Rule 2 for doing so, Rule 2 is fair sailing, the protest committee finds there was reasonable chance of her tactics benefiting her final ranking in the event. However, she breaks Rule 2 and possibly Rule 69 misconduct if, while using those tactics, she intentionally breaks a rule. That's a lot of words. So there've been a number of situations. There was a case, it was actually the US Olympic trials. Russ Silvestri was the sailor in a fin many years ago. He deliberately started on the course side of the starting line. He'd basically won the regatta as long as he stopped Cam Lewis from getting in the top 3. So he deliberately started to windward of the starting line. So he was breaking a rule or failing to comply with the rule. And he then picked up Cam up the first beat and covered him and sailed him out of the race with making no attempt to sail the race at all. Russ was disqualified under Rule 69, and Cam Lewis was reinstated because you can get redress if somebody breaks Rule 2 or Rule 69, and Cam Lewis went on to win a medal. When Ben took Robert Scheidt out, Ben did not break a rule. So the test then was, did his tactics increase his final ranking in the event? And the answer was yes, it did, because it was the last race. If Robert had won that race, Ben might not have won the gold medal. So it benefited Ben's ranking. So interestingly, in a single race, it's very difficult to do this because the event is a single race. And if you sail somebody off the course, on the other hand, why would you if it's a single race, apart from for the fun of it and the hell of it? But it will not benefit your position in that event, which is a single race. So you would break Rule 2 if you sail somebody off the course. If it's towards the end of the event and you need to stop that boat from winning the event, then you're with this case allows you to do it. Some people are still unhappy with the case. The case used to say that you could use any reason apart from, you could use if you were qualifying for some other event or whatever. It's restricted it quite a lot. This would also apply not just to luffing somebody off the course, but excessive covering somebody. If you're going upwind or downwind, and you tack every time they tack, and you do 20 tacks when everybody else does 3 tacks, it might be found that you were hindering the other boat's progress. You had better make sure that it is for your benefit in the event. Of course, covering up wind, if you've got a good lead and there's just 2 of you, you will be able to argue that I am protecting my position in that race. So that would be permitted for that race. Any questions on that?
That was actually a lot more concise than I thought it would be.
Well, it comes of help. Preparation helps, Gareth. It's a trippy, I think it's one of those things that I can see I really can see both sides of the story. As I said, I think at club racing, sailing somebody off the course is a pretty fruitless activity, to be honest.
You'll spend a lot of years racing against them afterwards.
Yeah. Would I do it to win a gold medal? Probably.
Why not? John, just quickly on that, your idea there of you think that if you excessively covered someone, you might be hindering their progress. How does that go if you just sat dead downwind on someone?
Well, it'd be the same.
Lots of jibes.
I think if you just sit on somebody downwind and they don't jibe or they don't alter their course, and you just simply go downwind and they let you sit right on their wind all the way down the leg, I don't see any issue with that at all.
If they keep
If they jibe away from under you and you jibe, and then they jibe back and you jibe, and then you do a whole succession of jibes, it becomes a bit like covering up wind.
I think I'm talking about without jibing, if they just sit on you, just follow.
If you just snake, if you literally follow them all over the racetrack downwind, I think it would cover. If they happen to be sailing a pretty straight course and you therefore follow them, I don't see how you could be had up for this. I don't think you've got to get out of somebody's way if they sit there forever. Same as going upwind. If they don't tack you and they're happy to sit in your dirty wind, why should you tack away?
Okay,
John, as a matter of interest, if you're covering somebody downwind because you believe you can take that position, which will improve your result in the series, then
absolutely, then that's fine.
That's fine, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And it only has to be a reasonable chance. Look, you don't have to succeed. You don't
succeed necessarily. Yeah.
The case recognizes. Sorry, I'll get it back. The case recognizes that there was a reasonable chance of the tactics benefiting. So you don't have to. It's just a reasonable chance.
So in reality, that when somebody's hard covering somebody else downwind, it's pretty hard to actually state that they were doing that for.
Yeah,
I don't know how to say it really, but they're not doing it for harsh reasons necessarily. If it's hard for you to prove they were. Surely, if they were.
Absolutely. I mean, I would want. I mean, I don't know. There's no definite number. But
yeah, sure.
Let's say in a given length of the course, the fleet generally do 3 jibes.
Mm-hmm.
If one boat who is being hindered does 10 jibes and the boat that's hindering does 10 jibes, I think they'd be banged to rights.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If they do 3 or 4 jibes or 1 extra jibe or 2 extra jibes, it's going to be pretty hard to get to prove it. So the trick is, if you're being followed, if you are being hammered by somebody, make sure you put in enough jibes that you build a case.
I guess also you need to make sure you're going far enough in a direction to make it obvious that they are intently covering you rather than doing it for minor positional gain.
That would be an additional factor. Yes, if you've got a long way off the, especially if you've got a long way off the proper course line that everybody else was sailing, that would be evidence as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that.
Okay. I hope that answers that question. How big can a luff be? Well, sorry, there's a lot of words here. I was going to try and get some pictures, but I didn't manage that. That was the question. How big can a luff be? Well, a big luff could either be a luff that turns through a large angle or it may be a fast luff or a combination of both. So we're looking at a number of different alternatives. I think it can be presumed that if a boat is luffing big, after her starting signal, she will be above a proper course. So again, if she got that overlap to leeward, she might break rule 17. And here is, up in the second one is she above a proper course? Is she above the course she would choose to sail to finish as soon as possible in the absence of the boat that she's luffing? So if you happen to be going downwind and you're catching up a bunch of boats in front of you and you luff to go around them, that's what you'd do if the other boat wasn't there. So that will always be your proper course. But if it's a course you would not sail in the absence of the boat you're luffing, you've got to make sure that rule 17 doesn't limit you to a proper course. If you pass head to wind, you'll no longer be leeward right of way boat. You will have passed head to wind and you'll be breaking rule 13 while tacking. So that puts a limit on how far you can go. You must not go through head to wind before the boat to windward of you. That's the same as we had on the start line. Remember the 3 situations on the start line. The leeward boat will be in trouble if she goes through head to wind first. And as an umpire, I never used to judge head to wind. I just used to look at the angle between the 2 boats. And as they turn, you know that the one that is most turned with respect to the wind must go through the wind first by just looking at the angle between the 2 boats. If they're parallel, you don't know because they'll go through at the same time. If you luff so fast that the windward boat is unable to keep clear while manoeuvring in a seaman-like way, this is what we covered really under the previous slides, she'll break rule 16. 16 says if you're the right-of-way boat and you luff, you must give the keep clear boat room to keep clear. You must be particularly careful if the windward boat has a spinnaker or jenniker set, as she may have to give room to permit the windward boat to drop that sail. Now, it's very unusual in fleet racing that a luff goes that far. It's quite common in match racing. It's very uncommon in team racing, simply because team racing generally don't use spinnakers. The windward boat might be required. So match racing has a call, which I think works pretty well for fleet racing if it ever gets that far. The umpires look at the windward boat's spinnaker. If they're trying to set it, in other words, they haven't eased the sheet off deliberately. If they're trying to set it, but 50% of the kite starts flogging, then the leeward boat has to stop and hold the luff at that point. Cannot luff further. Doesn't have to bear away, but mustn't luff further. And the windward boat now has to drop the kite. And that will be so far close head to wind that when you let the halyard go, the kite will not blow out sideways. But the leeward boat has got to be careful of the kite coming out towards it as the halyard is dropped. So what happens in practice is this never happens, because the windward boat goes up, the kite flogs, the leeward boat knows she's at risk, the windward boat starts to ease the halyard, and the leeward boat bears away immediately to avoid the kite dropping into her. And then the windward boat goes, thanks very much, pulls the kite back up and bears away as well, is what happens in a conventional keel boat. I don't think I've ever seen it get pushed that far. I mean, I guess if you were effectively in a match race at the end of a series in a fleet race for a trophy, it could happen, but I can't remember it happening. Any questions on that?
All good. Nothing on the chat there, John.
I've stunned them into silence, Gareth. Okay, well, we'll move on then. I've got a few more to go yet. We're finished with luffing. We're into this situation, which people have asked about. So we're going upwind. Yellow's on starboard, 2 boats coming across on port tack. The starboard yellow boat is an obstruction by definition to both green and blue because they both have to keep clear of her. So yellow is an obstruction by definition. So rule 19 applies. Blue is the right of way boat. So she may choose which side of yellow to pass, but only while she's the right of way boat. So if she attempts to luff here, she is going to go past head to wind and she will no longer be the right of way boat. So she loses the choice. So she in fact only has one choice at this situation. She has to bear away to pass astern of yellow. Green is overlapped. So blue must give green room to pass astern as well. And it doesn't matter if there's 5, 10, 15 boats. Blue has to give room for them all to pass astern of yellow. Any comments?
Yes, I thought that blue could ask for room to tack at an obstruction.
Well, she can't in this case because she does not have to make a substantial alteration of course to miss yellow.
So if blue was actually aiming at the middle of yellow, she could ask for room to tack.
So if we
But
move,
she's passing clear astern, she can't.
so if we're moving in this situation, so if you look at position 2 and 2 and they'd actually hit about bow to bow, in order to pass astern, blue would have to make a substantial alteration of course. She may now call for room to tack.
Okay, that explains it.
And of course, if she does, so let's just move on. So starboard's still an instruction. Rule 19 applies because blue would have, rule 19 applies to the obstruction rule, and because blue would have to make a substantial alteration of course to avoid yellow, rule 20 also applies, and rule 20 it allows blue to hail room to tack. Green must respond. The rule requires her to say either you tack or tack. In this situation, calling blue to tack is asking for trouble, so green will have to tack. When green tacks, blue must tack as fast as possible. She cannot now bear away behind yellow, having called for room to tack. She must tack. So she can't call room to tack and peel green off. Is that okay?
Yep.
So generally, if you look at where blue has ended up in position 4, why would you ever call room to tack and end up here? Green with a perfect lee bow and yellow about to roll over the top of you.
Well, unless you're just coming onto the 3 boatlands. I can't think of a
Right.
reason.
The only time you will do this is if it is pretty certain that after you've tacked, you're going to fetch the Windward Mark.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Otherwise, don't do it. Okay. So that's the port starboard cross. I mean, it just gets, you just pile more and more boats in, you just keep applying the same rules multiple times. It means that if there's multiple boats, blue would have to bear away early enough that all of the boats to windward have got time to bear away. There is nothing. Well, if I go back to this one, the converse is not true. When blue bears away to give green room, green is not obliged to follow. Green could, in position 2, green could still tack away. There's no.
John, is that the case? Is that the case even if green called water then?
Well, there's you won't find the call for water in the book.
No, okay, but for room.
However, having said that, if green does call for room or water,
yeah,
and then does not use it, I would say that that's unfair sailing, and she would break rule 2. It's a bit the same as calling starboard when you're on port, or before you tack onto starboard, you're calling starboard before you get there. Is that okay? Actually,
yeah.
that's a stupid question by me. Is that clear? So if green, green should not shout for room or water or anything, and then not take it. If it's clear that it's given. Of course, you know, again, we can get marginal situations where green's coming along, blue's coming along, blue doesn't act very promptly, so it doesn't look like she's going to give room. Green goes, room, water, and blue sort of doesn't act very promptly, and green is now caught wondering whether she forces herself into this gap or she goes, crikey, this isn't going to work, I better tack. In which case she'd be fine, and she would protest blue for not giving room. So again, it's not all black and white one way or the other. It's going to depend exactly on the circumstances. Clear?
Excellent.
So we've done this one.
Sorry, I do have one on the chat there. Nick Hopwood. Nick, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, on the sorry, I've lost track which slide you're on now. The second, yeah, sorry, the one before that one, John.
Okay, I just want to stop this coming up when I.
So basically, you said when would blue call room to tack and want to tack, and I think Carl said if you're approaching, they were going to lay the mark, but if there was a lot more boats on starboard.
Well, if there's a lot of boats on starboard, you might decide to, yes.
Yeah, you might get past the first yellow and then find your T-bone by somebody else.
You could. I can imagine the circumstances where there's so many boats on starboard piling in, but you are going into a death trap. You know, if you've got a starboard, I still think personally, I don't know, I would be looking like hell as blue to look to bear away and get up and get a much better lane to tack in than this one.
Yeah.
And I would give up, because if you have got a whole bunch of starboard tack boats here and you tack here, there's only one thing is certain, is you're going to end up behind them all.
Yeah.
Whereas if you bear away and look for a gap, you might end up better off.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I've seen it, John, in that situation where it's a line of dragons at slow speed and there just isn't a gap.
There just isn't a gap.
You have to go in and use a bit of momentum and try and shoot as best you can. Well, not shoot, because obviously you're going to infringe.
Well, again, if you're below the ley line,
you're in trouble. Yeah.
The fact is that if you're below the ley line, you're not in a very good position, are you?
No, it's not great.
And I still think then if you're below the ley line, you might as well bear away and just take the pain here, because one thing is pretty sure is that some people are going to get into pain on your left-hand side after you've crossed astern.
It's not a situation that's getting better, is it?
And if you get across here somewhere, you are going to end up better off.
Mm-hmm.
Almost certainly, in my experience. Yeah, the odds are with you. You're going to be better off. But I've seen lots of people try this. Okay. So we finally got to the Windward Mark. It's only 8:30. As we started late, I'm happy. Everybody happy that we do another 10 minutes or so?
As long as we get to that Ineos spell, yeah. Okay,
well, I'm gonna plow on then, because in order to get to it. This is very simple. I think. This is the Windward Mark and this is a leeward mark. What's the difference? At the Windward Mark, is yellow entitled to mark room?
No.
No, because Rule 18 does not apply, and Rule 18 is the rule that grants mark room. It does not apply on opposite tacks on a beat. So yellow is not entitled to mark room, and it's a port starboard. What about green and red? Is green entitled to mark room?
Yes.
Good. Yes, because Rule 18 does apply, because one of them is in the zone, and none of the 4 reasons for rule not to apply are not. It's a double negative, unfortunately. I can't write that sentence without a double negative. They're not on a beat to windward. One of them doesn't have to tack to get around the mark. They're not passing a continuous obstruction, so Rule 18 applies. They're overlapped because if you take the line across here and across here, neither is clear astern. So they are overlapped, and red has to give green mark room. However, as you go round the mark, green will probably break Rule 10, port and starboard, because she will not keep clear, right? So in order to be exonerated from breaking Rule 10, she needs to ensure that she sails within the room to which she's entitled. And this is the combination of rules that stops green just sailing way beyond the mark as a port tack boat. So she's entitled to room, but she has to go round it. She can't take red away from the mark, because she will not be sailing in the room to which she's entitled. And then when she breaks Rule 10, she will not be exonerated. That's the route that the rules take. And it's much clearer in the new rule book with the way all the exoneration rules have come into Rule 43. That's a really important piece of logic for applying the rules around marks. Green will still break Rule 10, as she will not keep clear when she's going around the mark, but she's exonerated if she stays within the room to which she's entitled. Is that clear? I'm going to move on quickly before anybody asks a question.
It's clear, yeah.
It's a really important concept in the rules. In other words, green does not become the right-of-way boat because she's entitled to room. That's the important thing. She still has to keep clear, and she only gets exonerated while she stays within the room to which she's entitled. Okay, there was a last question, which is quite quick. Can I sail below starboard jibe with my sail still on starboard tack and be right of way over the port tack? So here's a laser coming downwind. I don't know what it was, probably an aero, was it, that asked?
Yeah.
It could be an aero, this.
Yeah, one of those cheeky bloody arrows downwind. Yeah.
Yeah. The answer is yes. You need to look at 2 definitions, though, to find the answer. You have to look at windward and leeward and tack. Position 1, it's clear. The windward side is her starboard side. The sail's on her port side. The windward side is opposite is where the wind's blowing. She's on starboard tack. 2 could be more difficult because there's no real windward side because the wind's on her stern. So, but the definition of windward leeward says if yellow is sailing downwind, or if she's sailing by the lee, her windward side is opposite her mainsail. And it's obviously in position 3 that's a slight contradiction, because her windward side is actually her port side in practice, but under the rules, it's still the starboard side. And therefore she's still on starboard tack. And the reason the rules like this is because otherwise it would be impossible, as the wind shifts and you go down ways, for other boats to know what tack a boat was on if you had to know what angle the wind was to the boat. You just wouldn't know in a lot of circumstances. So we use the mainsail, which is clear for everybody to see. All clear?
Very good.
Right, here we go. This is a screenshot from the video. I don't have the movie because partly it's tricky and technically it's copyright restricted. But this is the start at which Ineos got the penalty. And you can see in that position, the first thing is you need to know that in the America's Cup version of the racing rules of sailing, there is a 2-meter keep clear border around the boats. And this diagram shows the border, and this is the diagram that's straight from the rule. So the boat is actually and here's the wing, and this border is 2 meters outside the furthest point you can possibly put that wing. So you've got to lift the leeward wing here and then put 2 meters on it. And I think it's pretty clear here that Ineos is well within that. The boundaries, the borders will be overlapping. So Ineos did not keep clear. She's not entitled to mark room because it's a starting mark surrounded by navigable water. We covered that last week. It is exactly the same situation as the first diagram in our review. It's exactly the same. Ineos broke rule 11, not exonerated, owes a penalty. They were then both early, and there's a little bit of an issue in the rules, interestingly, as to about whether that penalty should have been cancelled or both of them should have returned. Is a bit of a debate that's going on at the moment, but that's to do with OCS rather than the rules on between the boats. GBR, she did take a penalty because she tacked off and she was quite slow. Immediately, Prada got 50 meters ahead, so that's the penalty cleared. But Ineos got the right-hand side, and when they came back, she had the advantage over Prada. So the umpires decided that she gained an advantage by the breach of the rule that was not corrected by the penalty. So they gave her another penalty. Any questions on that? I haven't talked to Richard, by the way. He was. I did teach him to umpire, but I've asked him the question about the cancelled OCS penalties, and he hasn't come back to me yet.
Sorry, John, it's Nick again. On that very point, why is there any debate about it? It says it in the AC Racing Rules of Sailing, I think it's number 16 when I read it on Saturday, that OCS penalties cannot cancel each other out.
That's my understanding, so I'm interested to know why they did cancel them. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt until he's answered me.
Okay.
I mean, I think it would be crazy for them not to cancel it, but I can see all sorts of different situations where one boat was just over the line and the other one's a lot over the line. You wouldn't want to cancel those.
I think that's what. Yeah, I wondered about that. You start halfway up the beat and you both those. Yes,
but the rule's not very clear on that.
Yeah.
Whereas they were, as you can see by here, pretty much both over by the same amount. But they clearly can't both get astern of each other. So there's actually a flaw in the rule.
Yes.
But to me, there's a flaw in the rule about them gaining advantage, because they went over the line and then they Ineos tacked. They had a penalty. They were slow. They cleared their penalty, and then they split across the course. And when they came back together,
if they hadn't broken a rule, they'd be down here. They would never have got control of that first leg.
They might have tacked behind and gone to.
They would never have got control of that first.
To go to the right, and then they would have come back.
In match racing, you'd never call it. If a boat comes out of this, gets the right-hand side and comes back and is there. And the problem is it could have been a wind shift that gave her the advantage, not the penalty.
Yeah.
But it's going to get called that way every single time. Anyway, all I can do is explain it, not particularly justify it, but that's the way it would work. And I don't know if you know, I mean, Ben didn't actually argue it. I actually think they made a couple of mistakes in that race. When they got the penalty, the second penalty, what they should have done is immediately tacked. They didn't. because if you tack, you're going to give up 50 meters, which is what the penalty requires you to do. If you wait to lose distance, you've still got to tack, so you lose the distance again.
And they would have sailed to the favoured right-hand side.
And they would have got to the favoured right-hand side a bit earlier.
Mm.
I think they did do that in a later race, didn't they? They taxed to clear the penalty.
Indeed, in a later race, they obviously debriefed, because in a later race, when they got a penalty, they just tacked straight away.
Yeah.
They just tacked immediately. Yeah.
How is that 50 meters measured, John?
Electronically.
Yeah, but from where to where?
Behind I could get the rule out, but there's a line across the boat at on the grid lines on the course.
Yes.
And you have to get 50 meters behind the grid line. So it's the aftermost part of the first boat that creates the grid line, and you've got to get all of your boat behind the 50-meter grid line behind that.
Roger.
It's shown on your platform diagram at the bottom there, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. In order to move on to the next one, so this is the second one, which I think is probably more. I mean, the first one for me was an absolute no-brainer.
This is fascinating, this one.
This one is quite interesting. So I've got these two shots this time. And if you look at these very carefully, what you will see, firstly, there is no rule 13 while tacking in the AC rules. The boats are either on port, starboard, and that's it. So this is in this position here. I clicked my button just a bit too early. Ineos has still got probably 10 degrees to go to head to wind, okay? But very soon after position 1, GBR passes head to wind, and it's now port and starboard. I mean, whether she was tacking, it wouldn't actually make any difference because she's the keep clear boat. Yes. Now, if you look at Luna Rossa, where she is pointing in this position, she is pointing to pass the pin end mark to starboard. In other words, she's not going to get across the line. When at the moment that Ineos became the keep clear boat, Prada was not making the line. If you now look, and she becomes the right of way boat, and now she's pointing clearly to pass the pin to port. So she's luffed. I mean, you can actually see her track here. It is luffing, but you don't realize how much she's luffing until you look at where that line extension is to about a point here compared to where she's pointing in the second line, which is up here. That's a whole boat length that she's luffed in terms of her intersection with Ineos. So if Italy had not changed course, she would have been pointing from here, from the moment that Ineos went past head to wind, Prada would have been pointing to this point here. Ineos well clear. No problem. So Prada, Italy, did luff and established the collision course, at which point there's nothing GBR could do except keep going. So again, we have the same process. Ineos broke rule 10, in my view. She's exonerated because she's sailing in room to which she's entitled as a result of the luff by Prada. So it's the same process as we talked about going around the mark. GBR, Ineos broke rule 10 because Prada had to bear away to avoid collision, but Ineos was sailing within room to which she was entitled, and therefore she's exonerated. And as Prada let her go, neither boat broke a rule. And I've not spoken to Slater about it, but I'd be very surprised if that's not the story. And the umpires in the booth, they do have the ability. I've been in the booth. It's fascinating. The computer is constantly taking the boat speed and current heading and projecting 2, 3, and 4 boat lengths ahead of the boat based on its current setting and speed. So they know whether Prada, whether Ineos was in fact keeping clear if Italy had not altered course. They know. Is that clear?
It looked a hell of a lot closer and quicker on the screen in real time, didn't it? At 60 knots closing speed.
Well,
50 knots
Christiana
closing
was
speed.
watching it with Christiana and I were watching it. We weren't watching it live, but I didn't know the result. I didn't know it had happened. I was watching the YouTube replay this morning, and as they were coming in, I was calling it, and I called no penalty live off the video. But then that's what I was trained to do.
It's crystal clear.
As soon as you see this curve here, can you see my arrow? Is it show? As soon as you see this curve, the starboard tugboat's given the game away.
You could visibly see the luff, yeah, in real time. You could see that.
As soon as she luffs, she's given the game away, unless it was going to be a T-bone. And it was never going to be a midships T-bone. I don't think Jimmy even complained, did he, about that one?
No, I don't think it's only Ken Reid. It's only Ken Reid, wasn't it?
He didn't whine like he normally does.
I am very surprised by Ken Reid.
Yeah.
And I don't. And I said, I mean, both he and Shirley, I was very surprised. And I don't know whether Kenny was playing the devil's advocate, playing the dumb commentator for the sake of it.
They already had one of those. They didn't need to do that.
Yeah. I said to, I mean, I worked with Kenny on the Volvo Ocean race a couple of times. And I was amazed with his commentary that he didn't get that right.
You got a lot more to think about the rules on the Volvo Ocean race than in the foiling AC boat.
Yes, but I've also done. I've done match racing with him as well. Gareth. I mean, I was surprised. I mean, Christiana will tell you we were watching it, and I made comment about Kenny. What are you saying? Are you trying to make it interesting? He was talking about, well, surely the boat can luff up to get past the pin. That's a proper course. Well, yes, might be, but they're on opposite tacks. So what relevance is proper course?
And we're still before the start. And
it's still before the start signal. So what's the relevance of that?
Well, I was just going to ask you to clarify that bit, actually, because if Luna Ross is coming in, as you show in the top picture, she's aiming to miss the pin.
Yes.
And she's luffing up to make sure she gets across the line. That's a reasonable manoeuvre to come up and make sure she's going to come within the pin.
It might be reasonable, but she's still a right-of-way boat altering course. You have to give room to any boat that has now to keep clear.
Right.
We've got to get this message across. It's so fun. So I'm very pleased that incident happened. It's absolutely fundamental.
It's really interesting because there's situations where I've been in a similar place where I would have tacked, borne away, and gone behind the boat that was coming in on starboard because I didn't believe that I had any rights to go across them. Where I could have done, because at the start I thought they would luff into me and catch me in a port starboard. But from this, I could have tacked. If I tacked and there was room for me to get across them and they then luffed, you're
going to be faced, Henry, you're going to be faced with the issue. If it's a not umpired race and it's anywhere near close, you are probably not necessarily going to come out on the right side of a protest.
That advised us in a fleet, Henry, either.
Racing to the pin.
But for me, this was. I thought this was. I didn't even think this was close to a penalty.
That's interesting.
Am I right in remembering that Prada was over the start line?
And then Prada got over the start line, yeah. And still came back to.
He didn't luff up earlier, because if he'd luffed up earlier, he wouldn't have been changing course, and he'd have got the.
And he might have got the piece of him, yeah.
But that would have put him too early for the start line because he was.
Yeah. So what he could have done was luffed about here. Oh, hang on. Sorry, that's
it. Your time's up.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, but I think Jimmy got this one wrong. I think because they've got the high mode, or it seems to me they've got the high mode. he should have gone up a lot earlier and then borne away early to as some of us would bear away into a Windward Mark when you've got a port tack boat coming into a Windward Mark.
Yeah.
Then it would have been, and then Ineos might well have been able to keep clear by tack, but having to tack the wrong side of the pin.
I still think there's a visibility issue in these boats. There's a starboard helmsman there. I don't know how easily you can judge how much to
They
dial
know
down
exactly.
on that.
They've got
the
electronic,
to dial down on Ineos. Where's
No,
Ineos
the
actually going to
electronics-
tack?
the electronics tells them they've got exactly the same. They've got one of the same displays that the umpires have got.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They know exactly. They have this would be too dangerous if they didn't know exactly.
Okay, that's interesting.
Oh, they've got the competitor on GPS as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
That's
You
news.
can hear it when they're talking. You can hear.
They
them.
tell you where the boundary is. They go 15 seconds to
Got the lane
boundary,
line.
10 seconds to boundary, don't they?
Yeah, I didn't realise they had their competitor on GPS as well.
And they have the other boat on the GPS as well. Oh yeah. So they know how much they're gaining up. They know how much they're gaining up wind, downwind, whether it's a shift, whether it's boat speed. What they know exactly what's going on.
So you're saying Spittle might have got it wrong, John? He could have left up a bit earlier, but it didn't.
Well, I think he was late. I think he got it wrong. I think he was late. You know,
Yeah,
I think
what I'm saying is it didn't make any freaking difference.
no. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? And he probably knew it didn't make it. All he had to do was just keep out of trouble.
Yeah.
Because the wind speed was down about 10 knots, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, they're not going fast. Can I make a scenario, just a slight change to that scenario? If GBR was coming on port tack, had not tacked there, and the other boat was heading as it was, and then luffed to meet them, again, the same. So if they were actually sailing on port tack towards the line, they weren't sailing up there to tack round, how does that work?
It would be exactly the same. If they were keeping clear before the starboard tack boat luffs, it's exactly the same.
So can the starboard tack boat luff and then, and luff and put them in a port starboard situation and expect them to tack away or something?
Yes.
So
if it's possible for them to, if we go back to, so if I go whipping, I'm going to go right back to the beginning, and we are beginning to run out of time, but it's fascinating. I'm pleased that we're all fascinated. Oh, I did it. It was yeah. Hang on, here we are.
Yeah.
Right. So if you've got this diagram, actually probably I'm going to try something. I'm not sure if it's going to work. I'm going to try taking that out, and I'm going to just try and make this diagram a lot bigger. Right? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Actually, I need to take it out here. Well, it's not going to work very well.
No.
I'm going to wreck my presentation.
Right click.
Hang on, I can do it. No, I can do it. I can do it this way.
Yeah.
It's this one. There we go. How's that?
Look at that.
Now, if you want to put a mark in, so if this is a pin mark and the pin mark is here where the cross is, yellow's in trouble. She's going to miss the mark.
But
The
that's
mark
tough.
doesn't, because it's a starting mark surrounded by navigable water. There's no Rule 18. Rule 18 doesn't change anything. This whole thing is governed by Rule 10 and 16.
But if in position 3, position 2, they're going to cross.
Yep, they're going to cross. Yep.
They keep on position 2, and then at the last moment, the blue boat luffs up.
She's got to give room now. She's got to give room.
And then does the bear away shouting, "Oh, you got in my way," and all that stuff. They haven't given room to keep clear. So
correct.
Although yellow breaks 10, they're exonerated on 16.
Correct.
Guys, it's going to be a nightmare meeting me on the start line this year.
Well, there you go.
There's going to be some crashes at the pin, aren't there? I can feel
And
it.
Henry, I'll look forward to seeing you in the protest room.
It's unlikely.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I think we're done. I'm going to leave it to. So I think the deal is, I hope that was enjoyable. It took a little bit. We started a bit late, thanks to Boris. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending and showing some interest in this stuff. I can do plenty more, like tacking up the shore, continuous obstructions. There's plenty more to go at. So I'll leave it to Gareth as to whether you wish to do another one. And you don't have to answer now. And Robin will look at doing something with race management and whether it's sensible to try and do a combined clubs thing and get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I'll be in touch, John.
As I said, I am not going to create 4 different talks to 4 different clubs of Keyhaven, Royal Solent, Lymington and Lymington Town just to make 50 quid extra.
No, I'll be in touch, John. Probably I'm out tomorrow, but I'll drop you a line on Wednesday.
I think we've got a month to sort this out. And in fact, it'd be better to do it then. Thanks very much, everybody.
Great. Thanks, John. Brilliant.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I thought.
That was good.
Yeah, that was really
I just
good.
had a message from Paul Davis. Note to self: don't start near Henry.
Yeah. It's pretty quite apparent. Right. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that. Yeah, we'll get on and do the thing. Hey, Nick Ingram, have you got 2 minutes? Unmute yourself. Nick, unmute.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, mate. Can we have a chat about the roof of the Albert Hall?
How exciting can you get?
I'm sorry, there's nothing more exciting. We can talk about other stuff when we talk about this as well, but this leak, we seem to have.
Yeah.
We need to do.
I'm out of here. I'm out of
Yeah,
here.
I would, Robin.
See you later.
Yeah, so we've got to remove that gutter to really see what the problem is.
Okay.
And I was wondering whether doing that bit, like at least the investigation work, we could kind of get a Monday-ish, clubbish team involved.
Yeah. I mean, once I don't, we've kind of avoided doing anything at the moment because of the rules, really. But
sure.
Once we're comfortable, we should be able to do outside stuff soon, shouldn't we?
Well, yeah, it's still pretty tight until the end of the month.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, there is no major rush. It's just something we need to do this year. I figured if I rented a scaffold for a couple of weeks that was high enough that we could just move the frame along as we do each bit. And if we could just find 2 lads who are happy to just kind of take it on as a bit of a project.
Yeah.
I think actually resolving the problem is quite simple. I think when we undo the gutter, we'll see that it's sort of wicking over. I'm not 100% sure. I've only sort of had my hands in.
I'm a bit confused about that because there is a piece of metal, isn't there, that actually drops into the gutter to stop that happening.
Yeah, but I think what happens is that
how we're going to get underneath that
roof, the gutter fills up very quickly.
Yeah.
And then it's going over that and straight over the wall. And then in the sort of base layer.
Is the issue then not necessarily with the gutter, but with the downpipe? Is there not enough capacity?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure. But I think we've got to kind of get someone up there to undo the bolts all the way along, so we can lift up the roof panels, have a look at the guttering and the way it all works, and try and work it out. Because it's the whole length of the Albert Hall on that side,
There is, I understand there's evidence of water running back up.
Yeah.
It's obviously aggravated in that corner by the lining that's been put in.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of guys on the team who are probably reasonably well qualified to have a look at that issue once we get back in. They've got another project in mind, which is to do with the gutter problem at the other end of the building. But we could put it on their list early and see.
Yeah.
I mean, once we've got a kind of a clue about when we might get back, I can start winding people up to this.
I'm going to try and get some more info tomorrow. So the last I spoke to the RYA head honchos, their government lobbyists and everything presumed sports clubs wouldn't be open until, sort of end of April. But now we're looking at a situation where,
well, end of March they're saying, aren't they, for outdoor sport?
Which is a hell of a lot quicker than we were all expecting. So,
as long as we can do,
but I don't think we'll be able to open the club until April, May.
No, that's probably true.
They're saying. So we might be able to sort of
once the weather's improved and we're allowed to do groups outdoors.
Yeah, well, that's the end of March. Groups outdoors, isn't it?
Yeah. So we could definitely get teams together then.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be good, just to kind of, sort of. It's one of those things. I mean, we could just sort of, hire a roofing company in to solve it, and.
Well, I think it's worth us having a look and seeing if we can do anything before we do that.
Jonathan's kind of done a fair amount of looking into it, and John Richmond came down today, and he sort of concurred with Jonathan, and Malcolm Buchanan had a look as well. And I think it's I think they thought it was wicking originally in the bosun's in their little den in the cavern in the club. We're not allowed in, where the tools are.
We keep changing the lock. It's bloody irritating.
Fire exit as well, so they're going to change the lock in the little break glass thing. So the other one that I just wanted to also pass through is, we've formed like a health and safety committee to kind of keep an eye on the fact that there's not been great adherence with health and safety at the club since kind of coincides with when Alistair took over. Whether that's linked or not, I don't want to speculate, but you seem to know a hell of a lot about what has been done and so on, this, that, and the other. I don't want you to ask to join the committee, but do you mind if I pick your brains, and same with Paul Etheridge a bit on a few things, because it's a hell of a lot easier to ask you, hey, what happened about pack testing and so on and so forth, than it is to try and find paperwork from Alistair or anything vaguely official.
No, I'm happy to help, no problem. I mean, if you want me to come in on a one-off meeting or something, that's fine. Just let me know. Or, I mean, as it happened, well, I've had a couple of exchanges with Paul. I've sorted out the electrical with him, and there are some documents around which are about, fires and this kind of stuff. They're a couple of years old, but they're not that ancient. I'll tell you who was very active on that was Michael Payne. When he was secretary, he looked at a lot of that stuff. So he's quite a useful source as well, if he's still around.
I don't know him.
No, okay. Well, I could try and check up on him. Anyway, let me know, and we'll see what we need to find out, and then if unnecessary, I'll talk to Michael.
That'd be brilliant. I mean, there's a lot of people that I don't know at the club as well. I mean, I've only been a member for 7 years, and or maybe less than that. And, like we're talking about Chris Everett earlier on about the Albert Hall. I don't really know Chris. I've met him once in the bar or twice in the bar.
You wouldn't. But it is one of the problems with the club and the fact that the committees are only in for what, 4 years or 3 years or whatever it is. There's a constant turnover, and in the nicest possible way, there needs to be some mechanism for providing continuity.
Yeah, we've established that. I mean, with this health and safety thing, which just grew out of the COVID emergency committee, where every week they made an announcement, changed the bloody rules. That's kind of developed into health and safety, because through that we suddenly realised that nobody checked the fire alarms and or whatever it was, first aid and stuff. So yeah, there is a kind of thing. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think another thing that we're trying to get, I just suggested to Tony to bring up, that I want to bring up at the exec, is that we need to have both a kind of job description for those who are involved with volunteer work at the club, on the exec and so on, because Steve Homewood handed over to me and just sort of said, yeah, good luck, mate. Give me a shout if you need any help. Nigel Warbank could be quite useful too, but then this only came up because we were going through health and safety and who's actually responsible for checking that fire extinguishers are in date and this and the other. It turned out it was Steve Homewood as Vice Commodore. So we need so we need to kind of and
to be some central. I mean, what would help would be central documentation of some kind. I mean, when Richard was secretary, the world gravitated around the filing cabinet, and probably at the moment that's the most reliable source of central information we've got still. Yeah. Because none of it's been digitized. There is no online mechanism for us to put all our information into.
No.
Which would probably make life a lot easier. I mean, it does worry me. I've got, as you say, I probably do know quite a lot by accident, as much as anything.
Certainly not by choice.
I have to admit, I was even responsible for health and safety when I first joined the exec. And it's still, and Carolyn will tell you, it still worries me intensely when we sit in the solar room with 100 people in there and can't get out the fire exits. It is a worry. And there are rules. We know what the rules are, or some of us do. And so we need to kind of make sure it's all well documented and very clear.
Yeah. What's really interesting at the moment is that there's a number of people who are involved with things that are ongoing at the club. Jonathan King, so on, so forth, and they're not retired, but they're all in that point of their career where they're well paid. They have kind of done their bit. They don't want to go any higher in what they do, so they kind of get given that health and safety administration sort of role at the company they're in. So they actually know quite a lot about this stuff, which is incredibly helpful. But Jonathan's been great this year, just with the odd things that he's had with work. He's suddenly gone, oh, I was just thinking, the other day at work, we had to check the batteries worked in the fire escape exit lights and so on. When was the last time we did that at the club? I'm not sure. Well, I just turned off the mains power the other day and I only found one was working. We're like, oh, okay, right. So anyhow.
Well, that shouldn't be, you see, that shouldn't be right. There is a list of approved suppliers, and Central Southern Security, or whatever they call themselves, are responsible for coming and check all of those systems.
Yeah, no, somebody came in the other day and checked.
But there isn't anybody.
80% of it didn't work. Which, I mean, to be honest, like if I was, how would I put it? I did a meeting for Alistair this year with all the other sailing secretaries of every sailing club on the South Coast. And every other sailing secretary that was on that meeting could discuss with me everything from youth training, race officer management, right through to the doilies, napkins, and whether they're using condiments or whether they're using sachets at their club due to COVID. Okay. And couldn't have any of those conversations with Alistair because he wouldn't know and he doesn't care.
No.
And that's part of the main problem at the club at the moment, is that things have gone awry because Alistair doesn't contest
there
and
used to
nobody stays on top.
that may be something to do with the history. I don't know. I mean, when Richard was there as club secretary, he was on top of all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was the man who did health and safety and did this and did that. It was a bit like dealing with the civil service, because basically he said, oh, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't change it. Oh, no, 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 no. We've been there before. No, no, we don't do that. So he was a bit of a pain in the butt, frankly, but he was responsible for it. And when he left, it became a committee responsibility, but of course there isn't anybody specifically responsible. If anybody was supposed to be responsible, it would be the club secretary.
Yeah.
But
I think we're catching up quickly now on the situation we're in. I don't think there's any major worries, you know. We're learning very fast. What's great at the moment is Tim Biggs doing all that work on the electrics. Yeah. He's actually discovering a hell of a lot, and he's a very smart guy, and so on. I'm a bit worried that he's going to implement some sort of genial weapons system in, you know. Next time you do the wrong thing, you get zapped from a laser you didn't know existed or something. But no, he's doing a great job. We're uncovering things fast, so it's getting there. But yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that it was okay to keep sort of asking the odd question here or there.
Keep asking, and if you, as I said, if you want a sort of broader session on it, I can tell you what I know. Really, I mean,
yeah.
The PAT testing, by the way, is done every 2 years by a company called Simply Pat, and the 2-year came up on my calendar this week, and I've asked Jane to organise it.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that's been on my list. I remember when we spoke last or emailed last, you said that it was coming up and you knew it was around soon, so that's all good. Anyhow, like, get on, enjoy your evening. I hope you enjoyed the rules talk. And
well, I've been following the various talks. I loved Andrew when I picked up with his talk. I really liked his approach. I thought he was very good. I liked his. In fairness, I have to find Mr. Starr's hard work. Very hard work. John, he's lovely. He's just great, and he's practical with it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, actually, I was quite surprised. Me and Carl did Wednesday evening, and actually, it was more like a kind of a club bar debate. You know, well, what do you lot want to know about? You know, because me and Carl spent a few days scratching our heads on what we were going. We weren't sure if we were going to get people who've just learned to sail, or whether they were, you know, and we had a mix of everyone from Pete Barton and Dave Ellis right down to members a year ago, and basically their kids are into sailing and they're picking it up as they go along. So it's fantastic. But we had a great big debate about telltales and their relevance and stuff like that. But it was very much, you know, open to the forum, you know, no muting or anything. So maybe Wednesday evening, jump on and see if we can, interesting.
I figured Monday was enough, but yeah, I'll have a go at Wednesday.
It can get a bit much. I know. I was on here about 4 out of 5 evenings last week with various things going on. You know, yeah. All right, cool. Anyhow, I'll let you get off. Cheers, Nick.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.